Welcome to episode 219 of Your Career Podcast. Welcome back to Your Career Podcast. It's great to have you here. And how are you doing during these difficult COVID days? As I record this, Sydney is in another COVID lockdown, and I know it's starting to take its toll on everybody. And so, as you know, mental health has been of huge concern during COVID-19 due to the challenges that this has posed globally since the virus began to spread from China at the end of 2019. Now, I've been doing a little bit of research, and according to the Australian Institute of Health and Wellbeing, the statistics have shown that in April 2021, almost 82,000 calls were made to Lifeline. That's an 18.4% increase from the same period in 2019, before COVID. Kids Helpline received almost 26,000 answerable contact attempts, and that's a 10.5 increase from 2019. And at Beyond Blue, over 22,000 contacts were made, which is a 30.7 increase from that same period in 2019. Now, that really is of concern. So if you need support to manage the stress and anxiety that you may be feeling, I'm offering my How to Manage Stress online program for free during these ongoing stressful COVID times. It's an easy to follow online program, and it helps you to gain the personal tools to action and begin to take control of your emotional state. The link is in my show notes, or you can go directly to www.thecareersacademy.online/confidence. And you can start today. As always, I'm sending you lots of warm wishes and support. Now, in this episode of Your Career Podcast, I interview a very special lady, Anne Riches, who, after a lifetime of dealing with mental ill health while forging her own successful career, is hugely passionate about mental health in the workplace. Anne is deeply aware of the powerful impact that talking openly about mental health has for those coping with these issues and for anyone who supports someone with a mental health challenge. Now, she's a lawyer by background and an award-winning international speaker and educator on change leadership and workplace mental health, and says that the curious thing now is that she used to guide organizations in change, like mergers or restructure. Now, the major organizational change focus is, how can we be an open, safe, and supportive, mentally healthy workplace? While she thrives on her work, Anne says that the best part of her life is scuba diving and hiking in remote places, which of course is great for the body and better still for the mind. Now, Anne's presentations are described as relatable, honest, purposeful, kind, and funny. So let's welcome Anne to the show.
Thank you very much, Jane.
I've been waiting to speak with you because, as a mental health expert, and with everything that we've gone through in 2020 and also 2021, it's just ongoing, isn't it? You're the perfect person to talk to. But to kick us off, as I always do, because this is all about careers and career change and career transition, let's start from your early days. And what were your early career aspirations when you were a little girl?
That's a really interesting question, Jane. I haven't thought about what were my... Well, you know what? I don't think I had any. Let me explain. I think my mum had aspirations for me. And given my background, working class, kind of housing commission, kind of first kid in the family ever gone to secondary school, all that sort of stuff. So showing some potential from a very early age. I think the only careers they ever thought of as something that was a bit beyond anything else they'd done was to be a doctor. And I think they just assumed I was going to be a doctor. And so I lived with this expectation that I was going to be a doctor. I don't think it was mine. It just became mine.
Actually, it's funny, isn't it? It's sometimes we want to live up to our parents' expectations. And then if we do, many years down the track, we suddenly get to, I don't know, mid-career crisis or whatever it is. It's like, hey, this isn't what I really want. And then you start to make a bit of a change. But I know that you started out as a legal professional.
Indeed.
Right? Yes. So you didn't become a doctor. You became a lawyer instead. I'm sure they were very proud. So tell me about how your career progressed.
Well, that was funny in itself, because it was about, I was 18 and I recall getting accepted into university to study medicine, and it was all going very well. And I was particularly interested in eyes. I thought, oh, I'll be an ophthalmic surgeon. That sounds really flash. I can't even spell it, so that will be good. and my boyfriend at the time, his father was a butcher, and I just popped into the butcher's shop, and the boyfriend's dad said to me, "You're going to be an eye surgeon, Anne?" I said, "Yes, I am." And he said, "Have you ever seen a cow's eye?" I said, "No." And he said, "Would you like to?" "Yes." And he brought one out.
Oh, no.
He rolled it around on newspaper. He said, "You're going to be a surgeon?" I said, "Yes." So he brought a cleaver down right in the middle of the eye. And I just ran out of the shop, and I ran back to my mother, and I said, "There is no way I'm going to be a surgeon. Nothing to do with medicine ever." And so then I had to quickly find a degree where there were still some vacancies that I could do. And honestly, that is how it happened. A position at a university to study law was available. I took it. That's how I became a lawyer.
Well, that's a bit of a concern, isn't it, Anne?
As it turns out, Jane, I sat in my very first law lecture and thought, this is where I'm meant to be. I remember it very clearly, thinking, thank goodness for the butcher, because this is where I'm meant to be.
Oh, actually, isn't it interesting when you find yourself in a certain place and it just feels right?
Yes.
That makes such a difference, doesn't it? And so then you must have thrown yourself headlong into your legal studies for many, many years. And when you graduated and you were called to the bar?
Yes, but there's an intervention somewhere in there. In that, during the middle of my studies, I met someone and decided, foolishly, I think, to get married at the age of 20. Ridiculous, but that was the history in my family. But I'm grateful for it, because as part of that, I got the opportunity to come to Australia. So I actually started my legal studies in the UK and finished them in Sydney, doing the exams in the great big McLaurin Hall at Sydney University, sitting alone in a room doing the exams. But it meant that from the moment I got my degree, I was in Australia rather than Britain. And what happened was I had no idea what to do, had no connections, went to Sydney University Law School, found a professor and said, "What do I do?" And he said, "Oh, well, you should do a master's degree." Well, all right, yes, I'll do that. And he said, "I think you should teach law." I said, "I'm 21. He said, "Yeah, I still think you should teach law." And so at 21, I was teaching law at university. I mean, ridiculous.
Phenomenal.
And then from there, the rest of my, I sort of stayed as an academic for 8 or 9 years. I got called to the bar, as you said, and then I progressed into other legal positions related and ultimately to where I ended up,
And it's such an interesting career journey that you've had as well, because you were the Assistant Secretary General Legal at the Australian Medical Association.
That's
and
right.
Then the Education Director at the Judicial Commission of New South Wales. And then you were HR Director, Head of HR, and before progressing into your own business. So when you made those transitions into more of corporate type roles, how did that happen and how did you feel about that?
Well, I was going to say accidentally, but more opportunistically. I love change. I'm one of those people who my brain craves novelty, and fairly driven, I suppose some people would say, and just always anxious and eager to explore what I can do and just push the boundaries. And I'm very grateful in a way that I came to Australia because I wasn't held back by any expectations of my family in the UK or any of my colleagues or friends around me. So it was a whole new world when I got here. And I was a young woman in the right place at the right time. There was something about that. And so I just thought, I used to get phone calls. I mean, seriously, the only job I ever applied for, well, I didn't even really apply for that, the academic job, that kind of fell into my lap. And then after that, I got phone calls. So I was very fortunate. The transition to being the Assistant Secretary General of the AMA, responsible for legal and constitutional affairs, that was just a remarkable opportunity when I was offered it. I mean, I had no idea what it involved. It was a brand new position, and that's been a characteristic of my career. They've mostly been brand new positions, so greenfield sites, so not held back by any expectations of anybody else. And went there, had this remarkable experience of exposure to the medical profession, rewrote the Constitution, Code of Ethics, that sort of thing. And then the headhunting started. So from there, I guess my most favourite job was the Judicial Commission of New South Wales. That was extraordinary in the sense that there I was responsible for introducing judges and magistrates to the notion of education after they'd been appointed to the bench, which was a fascinating change exercise, let alone the content of any education. But you try telling a judge or a magistrate they need ongoing education. Back then, now it's normal, or whatever normal means.
Yeah, and so how did you overcome that? Because you must have very good influencing and negotiation skills in order to be able to implement change such as that, because that's a huge mental shift for them, because they would have spent so long educating themselves and becoming, top of their field. And now here's someone coming and saying, well, we need to have ongoing education for you to stay on top. What was the pushback and how did you do it?
Yeah, there was terrific pushback. I mean, I had everything going against me. I was female, I was young. I was trying to bring about what really is a massive cultural change, I suppose. I didn't have the information and knowledge that I have now about what to do. So I suppose I just relied on what I thought was the right thing. I knew competence was really, really important. And I didn't know, well, nobody knew anything about what judicial education was. This was an initiative from the government as part of their Judicial Commission Act, setting up that way of complaining about the judiciary, and they tacked on an education arm, which I thought was lovely. So I won a scholarship. I found out there was a travelling scholarship from the Law Foundation, applied for that, and used it to go to the US, which was the only other place where judicial education was happening. Went there, studied it, explored it, thought, what can I bring back? And then I just came back, and having got that information, I was able then to start thinking, where are the low-hanging fruit on this? I mean, it's a change technique. I now know. I didn't know then. But I thought, where are the most likely people I can get on board? So, then I started to learn about the power of networking and getting the, key influencers in my target group on board. And I was very fortunate to find a few very senior magistrates who were taken by this idea. They were great forward thinkers. And, we worked out a collaborative model. I sort of got the information. I then got people involved in the decision making. So that was, it was started off as a slow burn, just establishing my credibility and my competence. And then after that, it was basically influencing. Quite honestly, I'm not sure that the content really was significant. then it was getting people on board to the idea. And now, as I said, it's just sort of, you wouldn't imagine a world where that didn't happen.
What a tremendous achievement for someone so young. But the good thing is that you took it on board to really educate yourself even more in order to be able to implement this. So that was a fantastic achievement, wasn't it? And then after that, when your career continued to progress and you transitioned into head of HR roles, and obviously focusing so much on change and transformation because you're a specialist in this area. How did those changes come about? And what prompted you to move from one organization or association to another?
Low boredom threshold.
I like to hear that, yes. I want another challenge. So challenge must be a top career anchor.
It really is, and for some people, that is not what they want. And that's great, because I need people like that. I needed people like that who are happy to just provide continuity and stability in all the roles that I was in. But I saw myself very much as a change agent, somebody who wanted to go in. I kind of feel, in retrospect, I was kind of someone who went in with a great big spoon, stirred everything up, and then flew out and left everybody else to just bed it down. But that's what happened, because there was enough change, maybe not as much as I wanted every time, but there was enough for people then to build on that and to bring about. But you just, even in your question, you've just highlighted to me what was one of the key success factors, if I could reflect on it, and that is every transition I've made, I have done an enormous amount of research and education in order to go in with competence. I have gone in thinking I needed to learn so much in order to do the job well. And so I have thrown myself absolutely into learning everything I can about wherever I was going.
And I think that really is the key to making a successful career transition, isn't it? To be willing to acknowledge, first of all, that there might be some gaps in knowledge or skill set or qualification or whatever might be required, and then actually taking the action to do it. And by taking action, you're showing self-reliance and also resilience in order to be able to make that change too. You know, you've had this amazing career journey, head of HR, head of transformation and change, learning so much, traveling around the world, reinventing yourself, really. And then in 1996, it looks like you set up your own business, and now you are a mental health professional. And can you tell me a little bit about that change and what prompted it? And then we'll go on to more about, what you do now. But I'd like to connect those dots.
Yeah, and connecting those dots is really, really important. The reason I set up my own business in 1996 was because of mental health. I didn't know that at the time. So just hold that thought. Back in 1995, I was head of HR for a major finance house, merchant banker, in Australia. And for the last 3 months before I quit that role to set up my own business, I had changed. I was lacking in energy, enthusiasm, motivation, commitment, all the things that would characterize me. And I blamed the job. I thought it was absolutely all about them and nothing to do with me. And so I actually resigned from that position and then set up my own business later on. If you want to connect the dots from that, now I realise that at that time, those last 3 months of that role as HR director, I was actually experiencing a bout of depression. But nobody, including myself, called that out. So I wasn't aware. I didn't have the insight. It was at a time when people weren't talking about mental health challenges, and nobody in the organisation had the capacity, the confidence, the courage to say to a very senior person, you're not yourself, what's going on. And so that actually is a really important transition point to emphasize that sometimes people may blame the job for what's going on when it's not actually the job, and it could be a mental health issue. Now, I didn't know that at the time, and I set off as a change and, as you say, transition leader, and I had a fabulous journey in my own business from 1996 to now. But over the last 15 years, when my awareness of my mental health challenges became clearer and clearer, and my confidence to speak about them became clearer and clearer, I started to gradually weave that into everything that I did in my change work. And then probably about 18 months ago, and particularly over, the whole COVID experience, that's all people want me to talk about now. And I'm to pick up that theme about knowledge, I have done an enormous amount of study and work and research, and got myself involved with so many mental health institutions. I'm a Black Dog facilitator, Are You OK ambassador. And so now what I do is just speak from lived experience, research, all my knowledge and education around bringing about mentally healthy workplaces, and particularly talking to leaders about that.
I think that's so important. I think recognizing it within yourself helps you to be so effective to recognize it in others as well, and through all of that work. But isn't it interesting that you made a change back in 1995, 1996, because you thought it was the job and something external that was causing this discomfort or desire to change. But actually, it was an internal change within yourself. It was so intrinsic that really prompted you to make that change. And I think making people aware of that, so that they understand themselves too, and what they're feeling is something that's so important to talk about. I'm so glad that you do what you do, because there are so many people out there who have been affected by, mental health concerns that maybe still even now people are not acknowledging it to themselves. So tell me a little bit more about the work that you do with Are You OK and the Black Dog Institute, and also your own work.
Yeah, well, my own work is basically getting people to hold up a mirror to themselves first. I mean, I started talking about the oxygen mask theory 20 years ago, just as a change exercise, saying to leaders, if you're not able to change yourselves, how on earth can you expect other people to come on this journey of restructuring, merger, whatever it might be? So I was talking about that a long time ago, and what's happened over time is that's kind of morphed into saying we have to do that too about our health. I mean, if you want the best out of your people in terms of productivity, if you want to be an employer of choice, if you want to retain them, if you want to make sure people are present, not absent while they're present in your organisation, you have to be able to model that you care about your own mental health, so that you can then ask them to care about theirs, and then you can put in place activities that will enable them to care about themselves. Because we do have this blind spot still. I can't believe it, in 2021. We still have this blind spot around admitting that we may not be mentally healthy. And yet that's bizarre. I mean, there is no divide between the head and from the neck up. I mean, we are the same. Everything is connected. And if you're not feeling mentally well, I'll pretty well guarantee you're not feeling physically well either. I mean, and if you're not feeling physically well, like people who have, chronic ailments, chronic physical issues, or even temporary ones, even if you've got the flu, mentally you don't feel well. It's totally integrated. And yet, for some reason, historically, we have separated those two things out. And so my work now is getting people to be comfortable to speak about mental illness or mental ill health. It's not even illness, because I'm kind of all about prevention, doing everything that we can to minimise the risk rather than deal with it after the event. So it's about kind of being prepared to talk about mental ill health in the same way we talk about physical ill health. I mean, if someone someone came to the office, or if somebody's on a Zoom call and they got their arm in a sling, you'd say, "How are you going? What can I do for you? Is there anything I can do? What's different?"
Yeah, I think that awareness is so important, isn't it? Because so often when people do have a mental health issue or challenge, or however you would like to call it, they keep it to themselves. And then once you start to ruminate in your own head over and over and over, everything seems so much worse, doesn't it? Yes. Whereas as soon as you're able to speak about it and have someone just listen or just understand, or else say, "Yeah, I get it because I've experienced that too," then suddenly it doesn't seem quite so bad. You'll still have your very, very down, very, very dark days when you just, might think, well, I just can't do anything at all. And I know so many people personally, my friends who've gone through this, and also I do work with former police officers as well, who obviously with the PTSD, it's such a challenge, isn't it? So what do you do to help people to start to heal or be able to manage future bouts of depression or anxiety or any sort of mental health issue?
I guess I'm not a psychologist, and I never hold myself out to be. And so for me, it's around that's actually an advantage in many ways, because I'm not looking to therapies or clinical responses to manage what I think for many people is a day-to-day issue. Clearly, when people are ill and they do need intervention, if it interferes with their lives so that they can't go to work, or it's interfering with their family lives and so on, they really do need assistance. And it's a big thing of mine to go and get some help. But there are so many things that we can do. One of the most important messages is that going to work is really helpful. And that's the message both for employers and for the employees. Same way as with a physical illness. If you can go to work, you still go to work. How many times do we say to people, "You shouldn't be here, you should be in bed"? Because people see the workplace, and it is a place of healing. Being involved in work gives you all the things that you know and you talk about.
Connection.
Well, connection, and actually one of the biggest challenges in terms of mental health issues right now that I'm dealing with is some of my clients are saying to me the biggest issue is in fact disconnection, because we have not learned in this different era about how to switch off, and you would have talked, I'm sure, with many about suddenly you're all working from home on the same desk, but the computers are always on. And at least there was a chance pre-COVID that if we're working in an office environment, we might turn off the device when we got home for a little while, or at least had the commute. We at least had the commute.
Yeah, the commute is a big thing, isn't it? Because that's your transition from work to home or from home to work. But now all you do is maybe you open your office door or your study door, or else you might be even working from the kitchen table, and everything is overlapping each other. That's very challenging.
It is. I mean, maybe the commute is simply just pushing your Mac to one side so you can put your dinner plate down. I mean, that is not transition. So what I say to people is this is a really interesting time when you're going to have to learn self-discipline strategies like you've never ever had to learn them before. I'm getting people to try many, many tricks, like diarising time for you and putting it in yellow in your calendar. And it is non-negotiable. And what you do with that time to keep yourself well is really important. But people I'm not sure what's happening in workplaces. We still haven't got all of the organisations that we want to have recognising that this is a massively important activity to give people wellness time. Yesterday I was talking with a client, and they actually have given their employees a wellness hour, which is their time to look after themselves. They recognise that productivity, etc., is all dependent on being mentally well. But the interesting thing is that many people don't take it. They use it to catch up on emails.
Yeah, I think we really need to shift our mindset into understanding that, it's actually okay to turn off for a while. And what's interesting, Anne? I was just thinking that this last weekend, my husband and I, we just took three days off to go and play golf and just go somewhere different. And we haven't had a break for the entire year because of COVID, and we haven't really been that inclined to go away and just take a little bit of a holiday. But those 3 days, short as they were so filled with things that we just enjoy, like bushwalking and playing golf and having a nice meal and just sitting and talking to each other without having, phones and laptops and everything there. And it was honestly the happiest 3 days for a long, long time, simply because we didn't have to do anything. We didn't have to think. We were just being and connecting with each other again. And that was really, it makes such a difference, doesn't it? And I think people transitioning back into the workplace, I think having that mental health time or downtime is really important. I reckon that should be implemented across the board.
And we've got to make sure that people take it. I mean, Neuroscience 101, your brain needs a break. And taking a break is actually vitally important for your brain to function properly. So those old days when people used to stay back in the office, which is effectively what they're doing now by not switching off. But when those old days when people used to stay and do long, long hours at the office, and they thought somehow that was a career enhancing move because they were physically there and they were doing so much. Well, I don't know about you, Jane, but I recall trying that, and I was so unproductive in those later hours, burning the midnight oil. I go home, have some sleep, get in the next morning, and I could crack that problem in minutes, whereas it taken me hours. Neuroscience 101, your brain needs glucose, it needs sleep, it needs oxygen, it needs an absolute break from everything. I mean, one of the things, this might make your listeners laugh, but one of the things I'm doing at the moment is I've discovered a little game on my device called Wordscapes. And this sounds so bizarre, but I am now using that as an experiment, not only because it's fun to do this little thing called Wordscapes, but I'm actually using it as an experiment to give my brain a break. So every time I do a piece of work, I've given myself permission to play 3 or 4 rounds of Wordscapes, and then I go on to the next thing. And I'm staggered by how much clearer and more focused I am but it's Neuroscience 101. You swap your brain from focusing on one thing, give it a break, get on to the next thing, clarity, energy, all the things that you need.
Yeah, I think, with the different parts of our brain, being able to just relax in one side and then focus on something else, it's the perfect thing to do. I'm going to check out Wordscapes now. I could talk to you all day. This is so interesting. You're such a lovely lady. Now, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, where do they go? And tell us a little bit about your business now.
All right. Well, where to go? If you know my name, and I know that you'll have that up there, Jane, on the information, Anne Riches, that's the name of my website, simply anneriches.com. And also on LinkedIn, same thing. My handle is Anne Riches. What I do now, I spend my time having conversations with leaders in organisations. So I don't like slideshows anymore. And I've worked on the basis that having a conversation with a senior leader in the presence of others, so everybody else watching, and engaging them through, sort of either face-to-face or chat box or whatever, we talk about just what it's like to be in a mentally healthy workplace, what that means, how can we help people, what are the ways in which we can have a conversation, what are some of the sources of support, what are the signs and the symptoms that we might look out for, and just some very important self-care strategies, because I actually think self-care is, lots of people say self-care is a priority. I actually think it's selfish not to do self-care, because if you don't look after yourself, then the ramifications on other people are pretty profound.
Yeah, it's so important to look after ourselves, and I'm glad that you're there advocating for everybody who needs that little bit of additional support as well. So thank you so much, Anne Riches. We will have all of your links in my show notes at janejacksoncoach.com, and it's lovely to have had you on Your Career Podcast.
Thank you, Jane.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Your Career Podcast. You know I love providing career inspiration and advice, as I'm on a mission to make careers guidance and support accessible and affordable to all who need it. If you like this support, please buy me a coffee. I love a skinny cappuccino, and you can do so by going to buymeacoffee.com/Jane Career Coach. I wonder if you will. Now, I've more support for you at www.thecareersacademy.online too, and plenty of free resources that you can also download. So thanks for listening. Stay safe and stay well.